Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Ball Sense and another episode of Scout Watch. And it's the international break right now. And whenever there is an international break, I always feel like, oh, why does it have to be? Until I watch an international match and then I realize, oh, you know what, this is not that bad because it gives you kind of the nostalgic kind of World Cup feeling or the Euros or any other international major tournaments. You kind of get the feeling back when you watch an international friendly because the passion, the crowd, they're all up for it. One of the good things about the international matches are that um, the stadiums are always packed, unlike some of the other league games where sometimes the stadiums are not always packed. And there's always a cheer for the international team because obviously it's you're playing for your country. That being said, I would still prefer a little bit the club football to go on, but well, that's the way it is. So it's the international break, and I'm gonna bring to you a scout watch of the game that took place at the Wolfsburg Volkswagen Arena, the home of Wolfsburg. It was between Germany and Serbia. Um, a really, really good game. In fact, it was a really cracking game. It was an international friendly, not a qualifier, but it was still really, really good. And we're gonna talk a little bit about who starred and who didn't. But before we get into it, one of the major things that I would have to say is that um, Germany, well, going into this game, Joachim Low, the manager, um, he said he made some major decisions. One of them being he dropped Matt Hummels, Thomas Müller, and Jerome Boateng. And this was clearly evident with the fans because what happened was that he said in his pre-match press conference that he was planning for the next years, for the years ahead, without these three players. And what the fans did was they put up choreography in the stands of with Danke in German, which means thank you, and with the names of these three players below. So obviously the fans have huge respect for them, but also the fans realize that it's time for Germany to move forward after the period of a slow start that they've had. Uh, their very poor performance in the World Cup, also relegation to the Nations League, um, and much much more. So they realize that the team is not playing well and the team needs this change. So it was good to see the fans understanding that, rather than for them to criticize Yogi Low. So now, whenever you drop a player like Matt Hummels, who's won you the World Cup, who's a key player in his side, Bayern Munich, Jerome Boateng, the same, big players, big reputation, Thomas Muller, almost practically you can say is a legend of Bayern Munich. Whenever you drop players of this caliber and this personality, the first thing that you got to do is you have to get the performance right. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have to get the results right. Sometimes if you don't have the performance, you can be excused by just getting the right result. Um, but most of the time you have to get both. And when I look at the players that stepped in, there were some really potential players who I think are really good players who could be great players, but I wasn't too convinced. The only defender that did convince me was Lukas Klostermann. Lukas Klostermann, he plays for RB Leipzig. He was linked with Arsenal a couple of seasons ago, and I think it was last season he was linked with Arsenal, and he showed me a little glimpse. It was his debut as well. He had great attacking play down the flanks. What I also what I also like about Lukas Klostermann was that sometimes he was getting into midfield and switching with Joshua Kimmich, and that was really good to see. And he had great link-up play with down the flank, so it was really good from him. Defensively, also he was rock solid. I think he played almost a full game and did not get substituted. In a friendly game, that's always good when you play till the end because usually you do get substituted. So it was great from him. He was the only defender that really convinced me. The other starting 11 was at the back was Jonathan Tah, Bayer Leverkusen center back, who I have high hopes for, and I've seen him play, and at times he's looked very good for Leverkusen. Unfortunately, they were just being cut apart. Um, Also, the other center back, Niklas Sule of Bayern Munich. Again, not very convincing for me. And the left back was Halsenberg. So this was the back line. Germany played in a 4-2-3-1, and there was no Tony Cruz. I think he was on the bench, but he didn't make an appearance. It was Ilkay Gundogan and Joshua Kimmich, and the three being Kai Havertz, Julian Brandt, Leroy Sané, and Timo Werner. That was your front line. And as much as I'm a big fan of Kai Havertz, 19 years old from Leverkusen, as well as Julian Brandt from Leverkusen. Both these guys really on the night, I don't know whether it was the nerves or the pressure of playing for the national team, but unfortunately these guys did not really show me enough, and they weren't really standout players, although I do expect them to be. So it was a bit disappointing from them. They had good touches and good movement, good link up, but not enough penetration, never really troubled Serbia. Now, Serbia, on the other hand, I must say they rested loads of key players, but they really at times cut open Germany too easily. Now, whether you want to blame that and say that the midfielders were not falling back or the defenders were not good enough, take it how you may. But, for me, they really caused a lot of problems for Germany, and Germany did not really pressure, and it was not really the best of performances from a defensive point of view for Germany. On another day, if Serbia had to be more clinical, they could have maybe scored about 4 or 5 goals and put the game beyond Germany. So that being said, Germany can't afford to play like this defensively against stronger opposition because they will get punished, that's for sure. Serbia also had so many key players out. Dusan Tadic, who's been a revelation at Ajax, was not playing. Alexander Mitrovic, who scored quite a few goals for Fulham this season, he wasn't playing. And all in all, Serbia were playing with a slightly weakened team, and they were still able to perform really well against Germany. For me, the standout player again was Luka Jovic. Scored a goal for Serbia, albeit it was an easy header from 6 yards out, but you still got to put them in the back of the net. And for me, Jovic is an excellent player. He's a great poacher. He can use both foot, left and right. He can also score with his head. He can also dribble past players. If you look at the previous video, I mentioned about Krzysztof Piątek, and I said how he needed to add that dribbling aspect of taking on 1 or 2 players for his team to hold up the ball in order to become a better player. And for me, Jovic is a better version of Piątek because he does that as well as he can do what Piątek does in terms of clinical finishing. I think both of them are clinical finishers and top strikers, but Jovic has this part of his game, and if you watch Luka Jovic, you will realize how good he is at that, which is holding up, knowing when to dribble and knowing when to link up, and if needed, winning good fouls and breaking up the rhythm of the opponent. Also moving on, again, I have to say the standout player second half, none other than Leroy Sané, Manchester City player, was incredible. The way he drove with the ball, the way he was taking on his man, he can just beat 3 or 4 players with ease, and he is a top player, and he showed in the second half. Had plenty of chances to score, was just not his night in terms of finishing, but that can happen sometimes, Sometimes your finishing is not up to the mark and you can have an off day, so that's all right. But if you look at his overall play, I think he was excellent, Leroy Sané. Germany, again, if you look, like I said, they were very vulnerable to the counterattacks. One player who I thought did excellently for Serbia was in midfield was Nemanja Maksimovic. He was really the engine for Serbia. Milinkovic-Savic was very average on the night. He did really well, though, Nemanja Maksimovic, by shielding Milinkovic-Savic, and really had lots of energy throughout the night, had an excellent goal line clearance to show for his performance, and he was a top player for me for Serbia to keep Germany out. Marco Reus also came in and changed the game. Again, he's a player that's 2-footed, can put in crosses, can shoot. You never know what he's going to do. You never know if he's going to cross or he's going to shoot, because sometimes from a shooting position he pulls it back, which leads to an easy goal. This time it was Leon Goretzka who benefited from that. He was in a really good position and pulled it back to the edge of the box, and Goretzka finished to make it 1-1. So having Marco Reus for me in that team is vital. He can play on the wings, in the center, he can drift. And when he does that, it's dangerous because you never know what he's going to do. He can use both foot, and he's an incredible player. So for me, for the time being, if I were to choose, I would maybe leave Julian Brandt on the bench for a little bit going forward, and I would play Marco Reus more, and I would make sure he's a permanent fixture and the first name on the list. Um, that's it for this Scout Watch. There is also news about an Instagram page, so Ball Sense is on Instagram. Please follow to keep up to date with all the latest football news, the latest transfer news, to see which players are linked, and as well as to see what the player scouting of who's doing well, who's scoring goals, and which young players are coming up. So that's what you get from the Ball Sense Instagram. Follow it, stay up to date, and always know which players are the next players and which teams performing well. That's it for me. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, we will have another international scout watch, maybe another 1 or 2 games. So stay tuned for more, and thank you.